Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Industrial Real Estate Show. I'm very pleased to be joined by Zane Hengsperger. Got the name right again?
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah. Well, Zane, thanks so much for joining me on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Chad. I'm excited.
I'm very excited as well because there's not a lot of people that love talking about manufacturing as much as you and I do. So I think we're just going to have a fun chat about manufacturing in general. But first, why don't you share a little bit about your background and how you got into this space in the first place?
Yeah, for sure. So it's funny you say that because I actually wasn't excited about manufacturing always. I grew up in it. My first job was scrubbing the shop floor where my dad worked and where he had a machine shop. So scrubbed the floors and then eventually upgraded to working on a lathe, did some of the tool making. And, that was all through high school. Then eventually went out to college in Michigan. And then I always thought, I guess I always thought like, this is kind of boring. This is what my dad does. I don't really get it. To cut a bit back or to cut a bit forward on the story, I actually ended up, I was with my dad last night and I was like, damn, I wish in high school, I wish I would have appreciated this more. So I went to college and then, kind of went the whole software route, like software is eating the world type of thing. Went to work at Uber post-college and then started my own company, which was a software startup, which was fun and it taught me a lot. But as I was kind of exiting that in the past, 6 months here, or not even 6 months, it was more like a year ago. I was kind of looking for the next thing. And some of the guys I used to work with approached me saying, hey, you kind of know how to build software. What can you help us build this in a manufacturing company? So with them, we've been kind of looking for companies to buy and inject software into and just kind of basic operational efficiencies to make them better again. So while I took a little break from manufacturing, I'm more psyched than ever to get back into it. I think the Reindustrialize conference was a big turning point for me. And I hope that makes sense, my story there.
Yeah, it does. And mine was similar. I worked at a steel factory for a while and well before I got into industrial real estate, and very similar. I didn't appreciate it at the time either. You're doing hard labor and you're not thinking about how cool manufacturing is when you're actually doing that type of work. And I didn't appreciate it either until I fully got into the industry. And then you I just love factories. Like I love how anything that's being made, I'm very curious about it. And I think it was you who put out a post on Twitter, never pass up an opportunity to do a factory tour. And I couldn't agree more. It's like the things that you see in a factory tour are just so fascinating. So now you're back in the space. I know you're very interested in it. It all of a sudden becomes a little bit of a passion trying to combine your software experience with what you did growing up. What is it in a manufacturing facility that you find interesting now? Like why manufacturing in terms of just an interest point?
Yeah, I guess, well, from like a very basic level, I'm an econ major. If you look at like the Canadian or US economy, like it's kind of backed by manufacturing and you see us losing a lot of our industrial base. So what I initially learned, which made me interested in manufacturing, is that we actually need a very strong manufacturing industrial base to be able to compete globally and have like a strong defense sector as well. So it almost started as a place of like, wait, this needs to be solved. And then more of on a personal level, the reason I like it is just it's nice to get out of the office and actually on the shop floor work with the guys and girls and get stuff done. And I like the part of working with my hands. I like creating real things and kind of going back to the econ part of it, like you're creating real value. Like there's these huge supply chain effects of creating a part downstream or upstream, or you do an input and it's like a 3 to 7x output in the rest of the economy. So I just think it's really impactful. I think it's a strong mission to work on. I think more people should learn that, and I think the guys at Reindustrialize are actually leading that. So that's kind of what sparked it and where I am now.
Yeah, so I guess if we went all the way back, it probably would have been and it might have even started before that, but it's probably in the late 70s when China really started growing their industrial plant and they started attracting a lot of exports from people that wanted to now go and manufacture in China and then have it exported stateside. That persisted for 40 some years to where we are now, where China is the world's factory. They're dominating in that space. They have such great infrastructure. They still have relatively cheap labor. It's been very difficult for North America to, as much talk as there is about reshoring and onshoring, it's still proven to be very difficult to actually get any traditional manufacturing back to North America. And with the CHIPS Act and the Inflation Reduction Act and everything in the US that they've been trying to incentivize manufacturing, most of that has been high tech, gigafactories, battery plants, solar. And I guess there's a lot of different ways we could try to approach this, because I'd love to get your thoughts on it. But how can America and Canada and maybe Mexico, how can they be competitive to try and actually get some of that traditional manufacturing back? Like a steel factory as an example, where the USS is trying to sell to Nippon Industries right now. And if that did, then it would take one of the major steel manufacturers in history and now have that be a Japanese owned entity. So how can we attract or keep some of these traditional manufacturing jobs without losing more of them to other countries?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think it's a hard one. I don't know if I have all the answers here, but I think looking at what Anduril does is maybe a good place to start. So what Anduril does is basically commit as much as they can to purchasing local, I guess, from U.S. allies, all their materials. So I don't know what they started at, but I think they're at 0.2% is domestically bought rather than in Asia. So 0.2 is bought in Asia, everything else domestic. So I think companies first committing their supply chains to local companies. I got to think about this one a little more. Okay. Another one. Yeah, another one would be. There's actually a guy local in my town here who is very committed to American steel. So his company is Zuckelman Industries, and they have probably, I don't know, maybe 10, 20 plants around the U.S. and they have this whole campaign going on called American Made Steel, where they're trying to incentivize companies to buy domestically. I saw him comment on a LinkedIn post today of a local factory that went up saying, it was almost kind of funny. He's like, you guys should have bought American made steel. Why did you guys buy overseas? Like, this project's supposed to be bringing jobs home to the homeland. Why did you source, the biggest thing you had to buy from overseas? So I guess my first answer would be like companies actually committing to that. Second would be, how do people start companies where input materials can be made cheaper and actually competitively? So not only should that guy be making steel and promoting steel to buy locally, but he should also be, creating the best and cheapest steel. So I think it's more than just antics of saying buy locally, but also this is why you should buy locally. So yeah, I would love to see more people kind of build like early supply chain. That's something that I've been trying to focus on. Or was focusing on for a bit. And I think there's still a lot of opportunity to, how do you make metals cheaper? How do you make fasteners cheaper, components cheaper, parts cheaper, and do it at scale too? So, yeah.
A great answer. And I agree with you completely on that. And I like how you elaborated on that. Everyone says shop local or buy local, but there needs to be a reason why beyond just the sentiment of it. It's a great sentiment. Of course, you want to support the business across the street from you who might be your neighbor as well. But there needs to be a reason. So if they can actually start being competitive, and maybe it's a labor component, maybe there needs to be more automation so that it's less dependent on the labor inputs. So all of a sudden, whether it's an autonomous factory in Canada or an autonomous factory in China, if the labor component is mitigated, then all things being equal, it should be more competitive. Are you seeing much in that automation space, or is it still a lot of that old school guy running a lathe or a CNC and trying to make an output?
Yeah, I think I see a lot of the old school. I mean, I've seen 95% of what I see is old school, and I actually think, like maybe a bit of a contrarian take here, but I actually think some of the old school is really good. Like yesterday, I was looking at this guy sitting there grinding a part or there's this giant part that comes off the line, and he grinds it for about 20 minutes. And someone suggested, like, let's buy this $2 million machine so this guy doesn't have to sit there. But, this guy's only making $40,000 a year. You can even, train him up more, give him a raise, and get him way better at grinding. So I think actually training your workforce to be better rather than these like giant automation investments can actually help you grow and scale just by having good labor. What I'm still trying to figure out is, how do you compete with the labor overseas? And I haven't seen a good argument yet for like a giant use of automation that would be cheaper in the long term.
Especially when you're talking about a lot of these companies being small or medium-sized businesses, they don't have a budget such as Amazon. If they want to go and automate an entire warehouse, they can do that. If you're talking about a small, medium-sized company, they don't have $100 million where they can just go in and deploy into automation. So I agree. There does seem to be that tension, an inherent tension between labor and the cost of automation versus the ongoing cost of labor. And you're right. I don't know if there is a great answer to that.
Yeah. And like, just to expand on that a bit, like, I think maybe the answer is once you get to 80, 100 million in sales, but right now, I think 90, 95, I don't know, something like that % of shops are under 10 million in sales. And everyone's saying automation, automation, automation. But right now, what these guys need to do is, create a solid business that can scale, like from like a, like almost pennies and dollars perspective. Like we need to profitably scale with what we currently have so we can create enough cash flow to be able to automate in the future. So I think it's like two different conversations. It's like the majority of small companies versus like the big companies who kind of can't afford that automation. But I think where there's a big opportunity right now for people is to go into these smaller companies, the people who are ready to retire, create a well-oiled machine, achieve operational efficiency, whatever that means. But, and then actually maybe inject some software in there where people can learn quickly, where your business operations can scale, and you can create like a solid like business, like I said, from like a balance sheet and profit standpoint.
Yeah, that's a really interesting idea because I'm guessing a lot of the small, medium-sized companies that you're running through are not very sophisticated on that software front. If it's been run by the same family or the same group of people for the last 30 years, they probably haven't introduced a lot of software. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think most people don't know how to. I think I've seen 2 companies that actually injected software into their company and did really well. They actually sold and got really good multiples, but most people haven't done software. They don't know where to, they don't know how to. I've seen some people that don't need to. I've seen people make so much money with pencil and paper for the past 30 years. And there's no reason for them to have software in their business. Really just kind of makes it more complicated, and they don't need to scale. So I think a lot of people are kind of content with where they are. But I'm still very bullish that on probably 90% of these companies adopting software that they can scale.
Great point. And actually, I want to tie something in with a company you mentioned earlier, which is on the complete opposite end of being a pencil and a notepad, is Anduril, who's a defense contractor. And I think they're a fascinating company, and they're working on a $500 million facility right now. I think that they've narrowed it down to Ohio, Texas, and there's one other one that escapes me. And I think that was a little bit of rumor too, that like, I think people are just trying to speculate where this massive facility is going to go. But can you just describe Anduril a little bit more for people that might not be familiar with that company?
Yeah, I might not be the best guy to describe it, but basically what Anduril is a modern defense company that operates on a non-cost plus basis. So I guess to understand Anduril, you got to understand cost plus. So cost plus is I'm making a weapon system. I'm going to estimate it's going to cost me $100 billion to make this weapon system. And then the government's going to allow me to tack on 8% profit wise. So it's basically these public companies are incentivized to be inflated. Anduril is a modern company that I mean, they use the AI, they use the automation, but they really create defense systems on a new incentive model from pricing. So I think they're one of the first kind of startups in the defense space to actually win a lot of government contracts. Would you agree with that?
I think that was perfect. That was way better said than I could have. So I think you are the right guy to describe that. Yeah, I echo everything that you said. They're trying to work on. I know that they're trying to work on submarines. So they're going to have AI autonomous submarines that they're working on somewhere in Rhode Island, and then they're also working on military drones. So essentially, the next war, before we're all eradicated off of Earth, the next war is going to probably be largely fought with autonomous vehicles as opposed to people flying the planes. So it's a fascinating company, and you're right. The scale that they're doing, like they're winning. They had one government contract they just got the other day for $250 million. And I think that was just one of them. So they're already valued somewhere in the $14-15 billion range for this company that was started by Palmer was a former software guy too, wasn't he?
Software, hardware, yeah. The Oculus VR glasses.
Yes, that's right. So it's just kind of crazy on that guy's story of going from being on that side to now all of a sudden being on the defense side and trying to tie in much of what you're saying as well is how do you take an industry which has traditionally been very consistent but very old of just manufacturing planes, and how can you completely reform that and now incorporate AI and all this high tech into it? It really is showing the potential of what manufacturing can look like if there's all these changes in there.
Yeah, that's an interesting one because Anduril kind of springs the question that I've been internally debating is, do you start a company or do you buy one in manufacturing? Because there's all this legacy equipment. There's all these tribal knowledge. It's like you can't really automate old equipment all the time. So Anduril's a good one where I guess you can't buy a defense company. It's probably pretty hard to do. But if you start a defense company from scratch and you're really going for that, venture-backed outcome, it's probably the best way to do it. But it sparks an interesting conversation in the world of manufacturing where it's a little more simpler. There's a bit more opportunity to actually buy old shops. I'm sure both can work, and I'm sure both will work. But I think more people should be looking at buying these old shops rather than trying to start new ones. So yeah, that's something that I've been exploring.
What industries are of interest to you right now on the manufacturing side?
Welding's interesting because there's going to be a huge 400,000 welder shortage. If you look at the latest headlines, I'm sure it's a bit more nuanced than that. CNC machined parts will always be interesting to me. That's kind of where I grew up. And there's just so many of those shops that are extremely old school, but creating really good parts, and kind of the guys are ready to retire. So again, I think it's, you'll notice a pattern here is kind of like labor shortage. So welding's interesting, CNC machine parts. I think one thing I was exploring a bit that I was really excited about, but you just need a lot of capital to do it, and you can kind of mess up. So like your likelihood of failure is high, is metal supply. Basically, you're having all these new defense manufacturing companies, and everyone's kind of wanting to scale the reshoring. And one of the biggest inputs is your material prices. So when we were buying stuff to make injection molds or buying aluminum to make injection molds, it was like 50, sometimes 80% of our cost. It's like, whoa, this is crazy. How do we actually grow? How do we, again, kind of back to the business 101 of it, like how do we get better profit margins on our injection molds? So I think there's a big opportunity. I actually don't know how to solve it, and I would love for someone to solve it in making metals more accessible, cheaper. I don't know if faster is the way to do it, but I think you get cheaper by being faster. And then I think there's a lot of good guys working in fabrication, specifically 2D and 3D laser cutting and bending. There's like SendCut Send, RMFG, a few other guys doing it. I forget their names, but I guess less of an opportunity there because those guys are already kind of killing it. But the other three I mentioned, I think, are good spots to start.
So on the challenge side, as you were mentioning the labor, that strikes me as something that's obviously a challenge. But if we are successful in reshoring or onshoring or just growing the manufacturing base in North America, where does that labor solution come from?
Do you mind reframing that question a bit? I don't know if I totally get
If
it.
I guess if the manufacturing base were to grow, so if we were to start bringing just more production to North America, but we already have a labor shortage, how do we
Mm,
solve that labor problem if we continue to grow the manufacturing base?
that's a good question. I mean, I don't know if people like my answer here, but what we're seeing is like I'm in Canada right now, and again, we're looking at a company in the States too. So it's like an interesting perspective change. So I'd answer them very differently. But like in the US, the way we are solving labor is kind of like doing manufacturing days. So like a kind of boots on the ground approach is like getting kids in high schools like coming to the shop and like checking it out. But in Canada, we actually have like a huge influx of immigration from India of these like highly skilled workers, of people who want to work, people who have experience, and putting them in the shop has actually been like a game changer. Like they're again like their culture, they're just super motivated and want to work. Um, so I don't know if I don't know if I know enough information to say immigration's a solution, but I think um, the manufacturing day is like an interesting way to approach it. I think the guys at OpenX are actually working on it as well. So how do you? I think the answer is basically to train people, get them excited about it. I think it's a lot of teaching. I think it's a lot of leaders kind of saying, not like kind of showing that manufacturing is cool. I think these companies need to mature a bit, make more money so they can pay higher salaries. Um, so yeah, I guess to summarize a bit there, kind of teach slash show the youth, get higher salaries in these roles, and then guys like Reindustrialize are doing good stuff. Even Anduril kind of making it cool to bring them up again with like their Barracuda commercial. Again, just kind of make this stuff cool, a bit more sexy, high paying, and um, I don't know if people would kind of take the same approach of me where they think it's like economically important, but that's something that I've been trying to preach a bit.
Yeah, well, it really does speak to the difference between basic jobs and non-basic jobs. If, like you said, there's a multiplier effect if you're having basic work of something that's actually being made and then exported or used and injected into the economy versus a non-basic job. So I agree that it's a huge contribution to the economy, and we need it. We need it for the sustainability of just our lifestyle as well in North America. Whereas if there is a bottleneck in the supply chain and something happened with Taiwan and something happened with China in that issue, and it all of a sudden curtailed the supply of semiconductors, our lifestyles would be greatly impacted. And that's just one component. If we start losing other things that we could be manufacturing stateside and we lose them for any number of issues, our quality of life is going to change dramatically. So I'm with you. The manufacturing is critically important. I wanted to ask you, you mentioned the Reindustrialize. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more on what that conference was?
Yes, the Reindustrialize conference is kind of how it sounds. It's like a bunch of startups and investors and a bit more mature companies that are getting together and saying, how do we reindustrialize America? How do we reshore? How do we build things here? So that was in Detroit, Michigan this year. I went. It was freaking awesome. And I think they're going to do it again soon. They're going to announce something soon. So if you follow Mike's, I don't know if I'll mess up his last name here, but I think it's Mike Slaw or Mike Slay. And then Aaron Slodov, and there's a few others working on it on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. There, that are good guys to follow there.
Yeah, I do follow Aaron. I'll have to look into the other one. I'll find them and I'll put that in the show notes as well.
Thanks.
Circling back on to the making manufacturing cool again. How can you do it? You mentioned we got to educate the youth, which I think is critically important. We got to find a way to pay higher so that it's more competitive within other industries. But how else can you make manufacturing cool? Can you make and maybe it's tough. Can you make an old dirty factory look cool?
I think you can. I'm one who likes it. Like I think I just posted a picture on my Twitter of like an old dirty factory I was in yesterday. Like I love that. Like I love being kind of like with my guys and like grinding and like yesterday I was literally sweeping the floor. Like I like that kind of stuff. You know, I like treating it as kind of home. I don't know if everyone would feel the same way as me. But to actually make it cool, like Jim Bolosic from Sencut Sen has a great Instagram reels he's got going on. I actually think that's like a really powerful engine to educate people and show that like making stuff is cool. I think people like automation. I think show that you can build really important software solutions in the space as well. Um, so I don't know. This one does stop me a bit. Like I don't think like I don't know if I like my answer of saying, "Hey, we should be posting more reels on Instagram." I don't know if that's the best way to do it. But yeah, I don't know. I think there's more of a. I think there's definitely been a vibe shift. I think you see, like, I actually think podcast is a great is a great way to do it. Like, if you look at like why did Donald Trump win this election? Like, it wasn't all on podcast, but people are kind of calling it the podcast election. So I think just getting media out there about the importance and the coolness of manufacturing, and kind of like you regurgitated for me there, the wages have to get higher as well.
Yeah, I love the point, actually. I completely agree, is that for the most part, factories work out of the spotlight by design. Like most cities will actually zone areas specifically so that the factories and the heavy industrial is removed from the public view. So it's tucked away in an industrial park. You don't see a lot about it. The only thing the average person might be exposed to is if they're watching a movie and there's a speed chase with a couple of cars. They always seem to go through a dark industrial park and then lead their way through an old dirty factory. That's the most that people are exposed to. So I agree. I think it is. There is an appetite. I've noticed that as well. There are people that are fascinated and curious with these buildings, which actually make the things. And I think that now that there is some content being made on it, I'll have to check out that guy on Instagram. I'd be very curious to see it. But even on YouTube, if you go and look to see a factory tour and you're just looking to see how things are made, whether it's an old steel factory or machine shop, these videos are getting views now. So I think that there is an appetite. What I would love to see is more companies open their buildings for public tours. Yeah. Like a lot got closed down in 2020, like Boeing, perfect example. Their factory in Everett, they used to do factory tours there, and then they closed it after 2020. And they might have opened it up back now, but for several years it was closed. People love to see that stuff. So if I would encourage companies, any company that has a space, you don't have to do it all the time. It doesn't need to be open like a museum. But if you had a once a month factory tour where either students in a local college or just the public in general could come through and get a guided tour of the factory, there's an appetite for it. And that's an easy way to get exposure. It's an easy way to get people interested in the business, easy way for students to say, hey, this would be pretty cool to work at. So I'd love to, and it goes back to your post, I'd love to see more factories offer tours of their facilities.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I'm definitely on board with that.
Yeah, we'll have to see if we can get a movement going on that, because I'd love to tour more factories as well. I wanted to get your thoughts on location as well, because I like it's great to say the factories are important and we need more of these. But when it comes to actually looking at where these factories are going to go, are you looking specific areas, or are you generally agnostic to the location, provided that the business itself makes sense? So you're in Canada, you went to school in Michigan, you're looking in the US, presumably Canada as well. How do you identify where you'd want to go, or do you go where the business is?
I can go where the business is. Like if they're making money where they are, it's kind of like, okay, if it's not broke, don't fix it. I think there's obvious maybe places to avoid. Like you don't want to be in New York City in Manhattan. My girlfriend wants to move to New York City. I'm like, I'm not doing that. But I think like some of these hubs are really good. Like Michigan, you got automotive. Austin, Texas, you got a lot of like aerospace down there. El Segundo, LA is like a great area to be in. I think Philly as well, kind of a bit more the old school approach. But I'd say maybe those are 4 great places to start. But if there's a good business somewhere, if it's not broken, I wouldn't fix it. So I'm sure there's a million exceptions to that loose rule that I just said.
I don't want to get too into the weeds on how you're evaluating a business, as a lot of that's going to be proprietary to you anyway. So I don't want to delve too much into that, but just curious on when you're looking at a business, Are a lot of these companies just doing it as a multiple of income, of earnings, or how are you looking at evaluating from like a really high level?
Yeah, for sure. That's a good question. I think actually more people should study this. I'm still studying. I'm still learning every single day. Um, but yeah, there's two ways to look at it because there's some manufacturing companies that are actually losing money out there. So it's like, hey, how, can I get this for cheap and actually like turn it around and grow something big? But otherwise, yeah, you're looking at like an EBITDA multiple, and 4x is like pretty industry standard. And if you have a 4x multiple, you can actually finance it pretty well, and you don't have to put too much down. So I think maybe what a lot of people didn't realize, because I didn't realize it, is like you can actually get a group of buddies. Well, maybe not. You don't want to get your buddies and buy manufacturers, or maybe you do, but a few strategic individuals that you want to work with that you trust and you think are great people to work with, and you can actually put some money down or raise some money from investors, get money from a bank, and kind of start really small and with less risk.
Are you looking at from a business standpoint? What happens? So, do you typically look at it that you're taking the real estate itself as just an external component of it, where the company might own it, the company might lease it? How do you determine the real estate component of any deal?
Yeah, that's a good question. Actually, the one we're looking at right now has a real estate attached to it, and it's actually really good security on our business purchase. So if kind of things go poorly with the business purchase, usually you'll kind of get a good deal for the real estate, and it'll kind of act as like a, if things go poorly, we know we still got this piece of real estate we can hold on and kind of back up with our loan. It's a bit more of a hard asset, but everyone's different. Some people lease it. Sometimes that's better for cash flow, or if you want to do like a cheaper investment. But to us, I don't think it matters as much. There's lots of buildings right now. I mean, if it's like a CNC or injection mold shop, it's a bit harder to move stuff. But for like something like a weld shop, it's pretty easy. Not sure if I exactly answered your question there, but hope
No,
I kind
no,
of
absolutely you
touched on
did.
it.
And that is a really good point on the CNC side. It becomes very expensive to move some of that equipment. So how do you? And I mean, could be a conversation in itself. But let's say you're looking at a building or a business and it has a lease attached to it, and maybe there's a year left on that lease, but your cost to move could be considerable. Do you make that decision as part of your business purchase that you could have a lease coming up where the landlord knows how expensive it could be for you to move, so they a year or 2 years out they try to escalate your rent? Are you factoring that in? Are you trying to get an extension on the lease as part of the business purchase, or how do you go through that potential problem that could be a year or two down the road?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. Like fundamentally, it's why a few shops fail. Like if you're paying $10 a square foot or whatever. It depends where you are, but you're paying for every single square foot. So if your machine's down, if you're not using this part of the factory, if you're not using this part of the shop, you're actually technically wasting a lot of dollars. As soon as your rent goes up, too, you're paying more, and then you almost want to look at a good thing to look at is like your percent of rent compared to your revenue or compared to your profit, and you want to make sure that margin's kind of safe and healthy. Um, so sorry, I'm just thinking about your question specifically. Yeah, you definitely want to look at it, and you want to look at where you're going to grow into as well. So if you're saying I'm going to buy this business, I want to grow, you want to make sure you have enough space, or there's somewhere nearby. If you need to move the machines, I've seen a paint booth take $30,000 to move next door. So you want to factor that in for sure. Yeah, and I think this is the part I wanted to get to as well. I was kind of thinking, there's one point I wanted to mention. That's why due diligence is important. Like just kind of like your basic due diligence. Making sure the rent's not going to go up too much, and making sure you're in that healthy margin as well.
Yeah, critical on that. So I agree. That's definitely one reason on why companies can fail, is they just underestimate how productive they can be in relation to what their overhead is. What are some other things that you've seen with these companies that either makes them successful or puts them on the path to failure?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've seen a lot of people try to over automate. Like I've seen
Mm.
a automated CNC, I'm trying to think of how to compare the size of it. It probably takes up about 2,000 square feet of space, and it's been sitting there for 9 months.
Hmm.
I've seen people just buy too much equipment too fast. I'm still learning here. Like I said, I'm still a bit early in my career, so I'm sure I will make a lot of these mistakes. So if we ever hop back on the show again, I'll be like, hey, this is where I messed up. Um, but yeah, I think it's a lot of idle equipment that people aren't getting rid of, and again, just messing up that margin. But where I've seen people be successful is actually be really lean within a tight space, not grow too fast and kind of say, how can we make this space work instead of expanding somewhere else? Um, Also, some of the best companies I've seen know when to go to 4 days a week, know when to go to overtime, or when you hire more people. Again, that labor percentage is probably one of the most important percentages in the manufacturing business. So how you operate that is going to determine a lot of your success. I think labor is pretty underrated when it comes to kind of where people mess up or go well.
Yeah, I mean, it's clear the more you bring that up, that the labor is such a critical component of that, and that will be a challenge that has to be worked on. And like you said, in Canada, there's a lot of immigration coming in with skilled labor, and I think there's a big difference between importing skilled labor and letting people immigrate without any skills and without even going through the proper channels of doing it. I think that's probably the contentious issue in the US, where a lot of people are just coming across illegally versus doing it the proper way and having actual skilled labor come in.
Yeah.
On the real estate side, oh, sorry, did you have enough
No,
thought to add on
go
that?
ahead. Go ahead.
On the real estate side, that was a great point that you mentioned, that how do you make sense? How do you be as productive as possible within the space that you have, instead of having a space allocated to a machine that you're not even using, and you're paying rent on that, and you're paying operating costs, everything on that idle space? How do you determine the optimal amount of space that you need? Does that go into your due diligence equation? That if you're looking and saying, okay, well, this company is producing X and here's their footprint, are you doing any internal calculations on the efficiency of the space itself?
Yeah, so I think the calculation we actually do is, square foot, or not even square feet, because that's maybe a bad one, but your actual rent versus your cost, and your rent versus your profit, and your rent versus your revenue, and kind of make sure there's a healthy margins. That's kind of the nerdy way to approach it. But the best way to approach it, actually, just get boots in the ground and go into the space and see, all right, if I look everywhere, almost I don't know how to explain it, but you want to look everywhere and see something going on. You want to see machines running, you want to see people working. And if you walk through a shop and see only a water jet going, you see four CNCs just kind of down, or a lathe not being used, and you have one over there. It's almost painfully obvious. That's why I'm a bit struggling to answer this question, because you can see it on a spreadsheet. But if you walk into the building and you want to spend maybe a day or two there, or a week, and really, do your rounds, someone told me, you want to get X amount of steps a day in the shop, right? And I think it'll be painfully obvious to see if you're efficiently using the space or not. One of the best uses of space I saw quite recently was a guy. He put all his material outside and had his saws on the inside, and then cut a hole in his wall to feed the material. So then you're actually optimizing the inside, you're optimizing the actual building itself, and then you're optimizing the outside space. So I think good operators can get really creative. I would have never thought of that. I would have bought a bit bigger building, and that would have been a really dumb move, rather than do what this guy did. So, yeah.
Is there a rule of thumb, or just a quick ratio on what a good rent to revenue expense ratio should be?
I don't know off the top of my head, just because we're kind of getting deeper into actually working towards less looking at shops and more actually trying to buy one. But if you see enough, you'll kind of get used to it. I think I want to throw out a number, but I could be wrong. I want to say 5 or 7, but that could be painfully wrong. So don't quote me on that.
Well, I don't know on the manufacturing side myself either, but I know on the logistics warehousing side, that 5 to 7% is actually really accurate on what these big companies want to allocate for an expense item for rent. So I wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't close to that on the manufacturing side as well. But I'm guessing also that there's going to be a lot of variance in that, because a company that perhaps is operating just outside of New York is going to have a lot higher expenses versus a company that's operating in Detroit, where they could be much more lean. So I'm guessing that there probably is a variance. Maybe it's 5 to 15%, but like every company, you can only have so much overhead before you're unprofitable or at risk of losing money as part of the production. So I'd be interested to hear, as you're going through it more, if you actually do see a baseline trend, or if it is just a scatter plot of all over the board.
Yeah, I think it's good looking at like comparables, like just comps kind of nearby. You can kind of, if you look at enough companies, you can kind of figure it out and get your own benchmark. Because yeah, every, like you said, every city, every geographic, every different kind of sector of manufacturing is going to be different too, right? Like if you have a machine shop versus a weld shop, it's going to be different.
Yeah. I'd be very curious. And I do want to continue this conversation. I was even thinking, as you were mentioning, that Reindustrialize, if they do something again, I'd love to come to that one. So we could perhaps even do a live interview if we meet in person, or even just throwing out an idea. At some point, we could even meet somewhere at either a factory you're considering, or in a place that we'd both just happen to be at some point, and do an actual walkthrough of a factory and have you point out the business side, and then perhaps I could add a little bit of commentary on the real estate side. I think that'd be a really interesting video that people could probably get some value from.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'd actually love to learn more of the real estate side. I think long term, I would love to do industrial real estate investing. So I got to tune into the show more and actually get my knowledge up on this kind of stuff, because it's actually a really interesting asset class. You get the 10-year leases. It's hard for people to move, and it's not too difficult. You're kind of providing warehouses. I got to learn a lot more. This is very basic stuff, but it's interesting. So.
Well, it's fascinating for me on both ends too, because I'm on the industrial side, but I love the manufacturing side from all the reasons that we've talked about. So, and the two go hand in glove. You can't have a factory or a manufacturing space without having a company that's going to be manufacturing inside of it. So there really is, they're one and the same in terms of the end goal is to have a product come out that's useful for somebody else, but you need the building and you need the company. So they're really important together. So I think this would be a fascinating topic for us to explore more down the road as well.
Yeah, 100%. I think the coolest thing about factories is that it's one of the biggest announcements a township will make. Like we got this new factory, all these trades are coming in to build it. Like I said, the steel guy, the cement guy, or the gal, whoever it is, and then you're providing all these jobs. So I think kind of going back to my economic standpoint of it, like factories are really good for local municipalities, cities, provinces, countries. So love what you're doing.
Yeah, well, likewise. Is there any questions that I haven't asked you that I should have asked you, or anything else that you'd want to touch on?
That's a good question. Let me think about that one a bit. Maybe, okay. So one of the things that's changed my outlook on manufacturing the most has actually been being on X and Twitter and connecting with a lot of folks there. So I think like I said, I've just learned and found a lot of value there. So maybe a good question to ask me is, what are some good accounts to follow and kind of learn more about this manufacturing side of things from?
Yeah, let's go there. What's you mentioned the Reindustrialize guys, Aaron and others. What are some other good ones to follow on Twitter?
Yeah, so I'll kind of just maybe bucket them into groups. So Julian Fried is good from a welding perspective. Rust Belt kid, kind of overall like Rust Belt type stuff. There's Snowmaker, who's one of the Y Combinator guys, who's one of the more trying to push investing into the manufacturing space. He's a good one. That's his name's Jared. There's Kenneth Castle from RMFG. There's Jack Watson, who has a great family business in the Midwest. And then also Jim Bolosic, who I've mentioned as well. He's really good to follow on X as well. And then I like following Chris Power and Hughes Hadrian, and then Paul Marlocki and Anduril. So there's a lot more. Once you follow those people, you'll see a lot more in the space, and kind of it's great.
It really is, and I'd add you on that as well. And that you're, in my mind, you're a must follow for everything that you're putting out there. I'll include all those names in there. And the one thing that I found so interesting with Twitter or X is that there is a lot of noise on Twitter. And if you just go on there and start searching around for manufacturing or industrial real estate, you'll be inundated with a lot of thinly veiled advertisements of people that are just trying to sell their services or try to sell something. Whereas there's a few, and you mentioned a number of them, in any industry, but specifically to manufacturing, there's the few that you mentioned, and I follow most of them, I believe, is that the ones that actually do provide value rise to the top very quickly, and they get a following, and then it's self-perpetuating, where they're adding value and then they're attracting an audience. So then it's natural that they want to continue adding value. So you can get world-class education from people that are actually doing it. They're in the trenches. They're doing this actual work, and you can learn from them as they go through these experiences, and they just provide a ton of information. I think Twitter is actually becoming one of the best resources. If you want to learn anything, if you start going in there and you start digging and cutting through all the fluff of the people that are just trying to be self-serving and actually find the ones that are adding value, like yourself and others, it's a repository of incredible information.
Yeah, thanks, man. People, I mean, if you're listening to this, you probably follow Chad. You should follow Chad too. Chad's got a great account. I love following him. Two more, actually. So Technology Brothers is really good. It's like a new podcast, kind of in tech, and they post like, they're kind of like hard tech-esque kind of stuff they're getting into. And the other thing I wanted to note, some of my best posts have been actually industrial facilities, just like industrial buildings, industrial real estate. People love seeing really cool factories and buildings. So if you don't know what to post that.
Well, you'll get an automatic like from me. That's my favorite thing to look at on social media. So yeah, I love it. I love everything that you're about and what you're stating, and you're adding a ton of value to the community. So really appreciate you jumping on this with me and just for providing the value that you do in general. I hope we can keep in touch, and it'd be awesome to meet in person one day and try to do some kind of collaboration of walking through a factory. I think that'd be a ton of fun.
Yeah, thanks, man. Yeah, just to, I guess, recap, but yeah, I don't know everything. I'm still young and learning, but it's really fun, and I'm definitely failing a lot too. And like I said, just kind of learning along the way. So I hope we can stay in touch and have some updates and be like, man, what I said on that podcast was definitely wrong, or hey, this thing was actually right. And I would love to keep this going. So thank you.
You're doing the hero's journey right now, where it's you're going through a windy trail, and there's going to be some curves and there's going to be some roadblocks, but people love following along on that. So I think that you're in the right place to do it, where you're sharing what you're learning along the way, and nobody has all the answers. I've worked in the industry for 20 years, and I'm still learning. I'm still making mistakes. So I don't think anybody will ever have all the answers, and anyone who does, I'd be skeptical that they actually do, because everything's always changing too. It's like 20 years ago, we weren't talking about AI and autonomous vehicles. It wasn't even on anyone's radar. So nobody has all the answers. I love the fact that you're just open to exploring it and going down that road and taking it as it is. So yeah, let's definitely keep in touch. I want to hear more, and we'll look back and reflect on what we said, whether any of it came to fruition or not, or whether we were out to lunch. But I think that's half the fun in it. Cool. Okay. Well, thanks, man. I really appreciate you taking the time to jump on this, and let's definitely keep in touch.
Yeah, this has been a great talk. Thanks, man.
Okay. Thanks, Zane. Take care.